The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
This week, Economy Minister and First Vice Prime Minister Levan Davitashvili resigned. He was replaced by Mariam Krivishvili, previously Deputy Economy Minister. Davitashvili will now serve as the Prime Minister's Chief Economic Advisor and Secretary of the Economic Council. Guram Dumbadze was appointed head of the Government Efficiency Department, and Mikhail Maghlakelidze became head of the Finance Ministry's Investigative Service, a post vacant since Irakli Beraya's transfer to the Revenue Service on June 16th. Opposition figures Badri Japaridze, Mamuka Khazaradze, Georgi Vashadze and Nika Melia, together with Givi Targamadze and Nika Gwaramia, sentenced to 7-8 months in prison for failing to appear before a parliamentary commission. Japaridze and Khazaradze had paid earlier bail, unlike others. Zurab Japaridze and Givi Targamadze also received 7 months sentences to the same reason. Vashadze additionally faces a 2-year public office ban, and Melia faces a similar ban plus 25,000 lari fine for a 2019 conviction. Some business leaders criticized the court, calling for more proportionate penalties. The full opening of Georgia's energy exchange was postponed for more than 2 years. Now set for July 1st, 2027, the market will continue operating under transitional model until then. Preliminary census data as of November 14, 2024 shows Georgia's population at 3,914,000,000, up about 200,000 since 2014. Women make up 53% and men 47%. The final results will be released in June 2026. In May, 706,000 people received social assistance, including 239,000 in public employment programs. This is 3,274 more than in April. Over 71 million Georgian lari was distributed for assistance in May. The government decided to ban private companies from importing and distributing psychotropic drugs. These responsibilities will now fall under state control.
This is The Checkpoint. I'm Elena Gvangelashvili, author and the host of the show, and the Checkpoint's team is ready to sum up business and economics week for you. This week, Mamuka Khazaradze, leader of the Lelo for Strong Georgia party, was sentenced to 8 months in prison and barred from holding public office for 2 years. The decision was issued by Judge Zviad Sharadze after Khazaradze was found guilty of failing to comply with the demands of a parliamentary temporary investigative commission. Khazaradze did not attend the court session where the verdict was announced and declined to deliver a final statement. The case stems from Khazaradze's refusal to appear before the Georgian Parliament's Investigative Commission, which led to charges under Article 349 of the Criminal Code, failure to comply with the demands of a temporary investigative commission. The offense is punishable by a fine, imprisonment of up to 1 year, and/or restrictions on holding public office. Earlier, a bail of 50,000 lari was set as a preventive measure, which Khazaradze paid within the required period. The same day that Tbilisi City Court sentenced Badri Japaridze, one of the leaders of the political party Lelo, to 8 months in prison for failing to comply with the requests of the Georgian Parliament's temporary investigative commission. Additionally, the court imposed a 2-year ban on Japaridze holding public office. The case was referred to the prosecutor's office on March 25th after Japaridze refused to appear before the temporary investigative commission tasked with examining the activities of the regime and political officials from 2003 to 2012. The Tbilisi City Court imposed a 50,000 lari bail on Japaridze as well as a preventive measure on April the 5th, which he paid within the deadline established by law. Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze are the founders of Georgia's oldest systemic bank, TBC. Some businesses raised their voices on the matter.
Georgian businessman Temur Chkhonia has strongly criticized the arrest of Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze, leaders of Lelo party, who were sentenced to 8 months in prison for failing to appear before parliamentary commission. In an interview with BMDG, Chkhonia described their public detention in handcuffs as not justice but humiliation. A long-time friend of the two men, Chkhonia emphasized their contribution to Georgia's economy, especially through founding TBC Bank, and warned against erasing the legacy of business leaders. We're spending more time analyzing politics than building the economy. That's depressing, he said, adding that growing number of arrests of young people, journalists and activists is creating fear in the business community. Calling on business leaders not to remain silent, Chkhonia also addressed Bidzina Ivanishvili, urging him to reflect on the shared struggles of building Georgia's economy. Those who build the economy deserve more respect, Chkhonia said. David Bezhuashvili, businessman and founder of Georgian Industrial Group, has expressed deep concern over the arrest of Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze, calling the move politically motivated and harmful to Georgia's economy. Speaking to BMDG, Bezhuashvili said the court should have imposed a financial penalty rather than prison time, especially given the international standing of both men. Foreign investors are watching. Mamuka and Badri are well known globally. Their arrest will damage investor trust and hurt the economy, he warned. Bezhuashvili emphasized that even the perception of injustice and deter investment regardless of the legal arguments. The fact is already damaging. No one even knows what wrongdoing was really committed, he said. Zurab Eristavi, founder of Rental and Eristavi Estate, has voiced strong opposition to the arrest of Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze, calling it deeply troubling and unjust. In a social media post, Eristavi emphasized the pair's unmatched contribution to Georgia's modern business landscape and stated, "There are few people in Georgia's modern history who have built such responsible businesses." He criticized the government's handling of the case, saying that rather than acknowledging their impact, authorities have forced them into an unfair dilemma. We should know how to handle such people, not trap them. The truth is one, and we all know it. Businessman Bata Ghadzadze has condemned the imprisonment of Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze, calling their arrest a threat to Georgia's democratic and economic stability. In a Facebook post, Ghadzadze praised their lasting contributions to the Georgia's development, stating, "Nothing can damage the personal names or institutional reputation of Mamuka and Badri. Their work speaks for itself." He warned that silence from the business community at such a moment is harmful to the country. Silence is not appropriate at a time like this. It's truly harmful, he said. Alexandre Ratishvili, director of MBC Georgia and a well-known Georgian businessman, has strongly condemned the imprisonment of Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze, calling their 8-month sentences unbelievable, unacceptable and incomprehensible. Ratishvili emphasized their long-standing contributions to the Georgia's economic development. Those two people brought in investment, built companies, created jobs and strengthened the budget. Their imprisonment cannot be justified. He warned that the arrest sent a damaging signal to foreign investors. Why would anyone invest in a country where successful businessmen are jailed for not appearing before a commission? Alexandre Ratishvili called on business communities to speak out. Silence is complicity. Hopefully others will now find the courage to speak up. He also questioned the government's motives in creating an unstable climate. Georgia needs peace and stability, not high-profile imprisonments that undermine years of progress, he added. Businessman Kakha Khazaradze, chairman of ICR Group, has spoken out about the recent imprisonment of his cousin Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze, calling it deeply painful and unjust. Speaking on BMG TV, Khazaradze refrained from political judgment but strongly defended their legacy as entrepreneurs. Mamuka and I grew up together and co-founded TBC Group in the 1990s. We made history. We brought capital into country, built institutions like TBC and the Borjomi project. I'm proud of that. He criticized the government of jailing people with such national contributions for not appearing before parliamentary commission to imprison someone who helped shape the economy. How can we speak of justice in such a country? Khazaradze added that broader repression, including arrests of youth, journalists and civil activists, reflects a lack of rule of law in Georgia. Today, the law does not apply and there is no justice, he declared. Banker Giorgi Shagidze, former CFO and Deputy General Director of TBC Bank, has expressed disappointment over the imprisonment of Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze, founders of Lela Party and former TBC executives. I'm connected to them through years of friendship and shared achievements at TBC. Shagidze wrote on Facebook, I saw their patriotism and how they did great things for Georgia's business sector. He highlighted Badri Japaridze's role in attracting foreign investment to Georgia and praised his deep understanding for the country's potential. Shagidze wished the two strengthened resilience during what he described as an unjust and disappointing situation.
The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe held a debate on Georgia where the discussion focused on the ongoing processes in Georgia. Statements were made by MEPs who condemned the Georgian Dream regime and called on EU countries to take effective steps. Statements were made by them that sanctions should be imposed on those in power who are responsible for the illegal detentions of people. Earlier, the European Parliament and European Council have agreed on expanded criteria for suspending visa-free travel for short-term visits to the EU. According to an official EU statement, the revised mechanism will allow the bloc to act more flexibly in response to violations of key principles by partner countries. Grounds for suspension now include violations of the UN Charter or international human rights, humanitarian law, non-compliance with international court decisions, hybrid threats such as state-sponsored migration manipulation, security risks tied to golden passport schemes, visa policy misalignment that facilitates illegal migration into the EU. Existing criteria such as lack of cooperation on migrant readmission will remain in effect. The big question today is whether Georgia will lose visa liberalization with the EU or not. Ricardo Yozviak shared some of his thoughts and observations on this and other EU-Georgia related matters.
Mr. Yozviak, thank you for being with me and taking my questions. Let us start like this. I mean, what would you call at this point EU-Georgia relations?
I think they are probably at the lowest I have seen since I started covering EU-Georgia relations, maybe in 2008. I mean, like, there's simply very little going on between Brussels and Tbilisi. Brussels are, in a sense, stuck because they can't find a unanimity to do anything in terms of punishments, if you can say it this way. But in the same time, they don't want to engage in any other positive way with a regime that they're not sure what to call. So it's really, while Ukraine and Moldova are moving forward towards eventual EU membership, and I know it's a long path, but it's still happening, Georgia is going in reverse, and that's obvious.
How do you read? I mean, what are the main messages coming from Georgian Dream towards EU and vice versa, from the EU towards Georgian Dream?
I mean, the Georgian Dream doesn't really seem to care what Brussels say or what any big EU capitals say. They are going about their business. I see now, sentencing opposition leaders and so on. So I don't think that they really have much interest in approaching Brussels, and Brussels is picking up on those signals and are not really, engaging with Georgia. So it's very much a relationship that you wouldn't normally would see with a candidate country. I mean, an EU candidate country is engaging with Brussels on pretty much everything, every week, every month in various sort of fora. Here's nothing. So, Georgia is somehow disconnecting from the entire Euro-Atlantic space. I look at the two summits that will take place this week, one in Brussels, the EU summit, one summit in The Hague, NATO summit. Georgia is not there. There's not a mention of Georgia in any of the draft declarations. I mean, normally, Georgia, being an Inspire Euro-Atlantic member, would try to at least feature somewhere in these meetings. Now that's not the case. So I think that gives you an indication of...
Is it the normal way that the EU is dealing with Georgia being the candidate country status and like going further and further in the values that brought this candidate status to the country in the first place?
I mean, yeah, in a sense, it's sort of like, the European Union has so many other things to deal with now. So if Georgia is not willing to get closer, and they have indicated that they're not that they're not willing to do that in the next couple of years, the EU is not gonna, run over itself just to re-engage with Georgia. There are other more important things to deal with. Ukraine, Moldova, Western Balkans, now everything that's happening in Iran. So the EU has enough on its homework list not to having to care about Georgia. And if Georgia is not interested, which they clearly aren't, then, well, that's the relationship. It's a candidate country in name only.
So do you think it is overestimated what type of importance might Georgia have for the EU in terms of its like geopolitical location, or whatever we heard was important to the EU at the point when Georgia was an aspiring country and on track on its Euro-Atlantic integration?
Yeah, I mean, look, okay, Georgia is still being discussed. It was still discussed by EU foreign ministers yesterday, but let me paint the meeting for you. It was a meeting that started at 9:30 and finished around 6 o'clock. So let's say it was, 9 hours. They maybe devoted 20 minutes to Georgia at the very end, when pretty much many foreign ministers had gone home already. Like, other than that, they discussed Ukraine, Middle East, and that's it. So, and China as well. But so Georgia is not really like, it was put there as a sort of discussion point, again, to see where we are. Maybe they will discuss it next month, but Georgia is slipping away from the agenda in the sort of same way as a smaller candidate country that shows no interest is. I mean, I would compare it to a certain extent with North Macedonia. At one point in their recent history, were very interested in joining the EU, but now they're not, because they're having this bilateral fight with Bulgaria. North Macedonia is nowhere again, and this is the sort of thing with Georgia. Georgia is sort of like has become the North Macedonia of the eastern countries, where it's not being talked about really, and that's where we are.
So what is the role of the European Parliament in this overall say of the European Union structure, if I'm putting that into words correctly? I mean, because we see European Parliament fighting for Georgia, right? Passing resolutions, calling on sanctioning the individuals who are responsible for diverting Georgia from this path.
Yeah. In the same time, I've always said this, and I've been always very clear about that the European Parliament is not really a foreign policy player. Their resolutions are non-binding. But what they are doing, though, is that at least it's the Brussels institution that still mention Georgia every now and then and brings it up on the agenda. You saw the resolution last week, and I think the next step that will come is in July. They will likely have this yearly report about Georgia, which will also be very damning. I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, Mzia will be nominated for the Sakharov Prize. So this sort of thing will be, later in the autumn. So the European Parliament will be the chamber where Georgia is talked about. But it's very important to remember that it's just being talked about. The main decisions must still come from the Council, from the Commission, and there, I think things are frozen essentially, and that's sort of what we're looking at. But let's say, the Commission will come with an enlargement report in the autumn as well. And there, I think the report will be very difficult read for Georgia because it will be very negative. I can already say that now, even though it will come in October. So, there's not much good news coming from Brussels anywhere, whether it's Parliament, Commission or Council.
Do you think on the EU level is the discussion about like individual sanctions over? I mean, is Hungary and Slovakia winning in this game?
I think it's interesting here because individual sanctions, yes, you need unanimity. But I thought when I listened to Kaja Kallas later, that she's now also opening up the potential of sanctioning judges. Now, maybe this could be something easier to swallow for something like Hungary and Slovakia, because before they have sort of blocked, high-level names of the Georgian Dream, allies of theirs, and that they're going to continue blocking that. I'm wondering that maybe if there are, sanctions on people who are not that famous, like judges and these sort of things, that maybe they will come along with that. That was normally the case in the beginning when it was, Russia sanctions, Belarus sanctions, that, the EU did the sort of people that were not that famous and that was acceptable for everyone. I think that there might be a possibility, but then again, knowing how much Hungary and Slovakia are blocking, I expect them to block pretty much everything, but there could be an opening. That's sort of, I hold out some sort of possibility of that.
Also, what do you think about these talks about suspending visa liberalization, DCFTA status, association agreement, and candidate country status? I mean, everything that is still binding Georgia with the EU as the close ally.
I think visa liberalization will be a tough one because somehow, the EU wouldn't like to hurt the general population. I can see that happening. With the association agreement, or more likely the free trade aspect of it, that's interesting. Perhaps that, the EU recently just did a report about Israel, reviewing the similar agreement with Israel and see where this is going. I wouldn't be surprised if the European Commission starts a review about this, but I would be surprised if there is if this happens, because it's sort of like a free trade agreement. It's not something that normally is being attacked, but I wouldn't rule it out going forward. I think if I have to bet on one thing happening further down the line, visa liberalization don't think will happen, but the review with a potential sort of suspension of the trade part down the line potentially could happen if we don't see any changes.
This is interesting now, your point, because we heard the Tea Tzolukiani yesterday talking about these scenarios, so to say, and her quote is, let me read it out to you. "I know they are considering this," meaning visa liberalization, and as they say, they do mean about visa liberalization. They do mean it. Do you think Georgian Dream is considering the possibility that visa liberalization might be suspended for Georgia?
If I only knew what Georgian Dream is considering, that would be an interesting thing, But
that's a fair answer.
This was the sort of thing. The visa liberalization is, for me, the crown jewel in the relations between the EU and Georgia, and is something that all Georgians, you included, benefit from, right? So I don't think that is usually the EU path to go down, but let's see. I don't think it will be touched in the end. I'm reluctant to think about that.
But what are your expectations? I mean, after the 28 November statement, and now proactively Georgian Dream speaking about this possibility and opening up for that type of discussion. There could be two reasons for that, right? First is, look, EU is talking about something and they are not doing it. This might be one. And another is that there might be some kind of scenario like 28th of November statement, I don't know, on 2 feet with honor, we might say ourselves no to visa liberalization. Do you see that type of scenario possible? I mean,
I don't think that they would go that far, but then again, I don't know. I mean, this is the sort of thing. Well, I mean, they've already sort of, cut themselves away from the EU so much that it could happen. Would they target visa liberalization? I don't know. I mean, is that sort of a thing they would like to do? Would they still be able to remain somewhat popular among their own voting base? Maybe. But it's hard. It's speculative. What they are doing in Tbilisi is an enigma for me sitting here in the EU.
Also, do you think electorate base and like rules of democracy matter in Georgia at this point still? Because probably you are watching, you are seeing the laws, the preferential laws being taken, laws on grants, Georgian FARA, changes to the broadcasting law. I mean, these are like consolidation of censorship and and these are not like my personal opinions, so to say, right?
This is clear.
This is clear. So do you think that mindset and that thinking that we used to have when we believed that democracy was still in Georgia applies to what we see right now going on in Georgia?
I think it's harder to argue in that sense. Absolutely. I mean, like it's a different country with a different trajectory. It's a different mindset. I think many of those people who did at some point look westward have actually gone westward already and are not in Georgia anymore. So it's clear that the country has fundamentally changed into something else. I think everyone in the West pretty much sees that. But this is the thing. It's ultimately that can only change through the ballot box. Nowhere else. So I mean, I think Georgia, is slipping away for now on its Euro-Atlantic path. It's been clear for a while already. Can it come back again? Yes, I think so. I mean, because what you've had is not something that was artificial. I think that's true, and that's sort of true in everyone who's protesting as well. So it's, I'd like to, the way I see it is that I still see Georgia as a fundamentally European country that now has taken another path, but can come back again. And I think that's entirely possible, because the Georgian people, I think, have not changed their mind fundamentally about where they want to see themselves in the future.
Richard, knowing the logic of Brussels and officials and EU and how EU digests things and processes, what would be a wiser political decision at this point for the opposition to be involved in these elections that are coming up, or to kind of protesting against it and not participating, since nothing has changed, right? Nothing will be changing. CC won't be changing, the rules won't be changing, and we have all these laws that kind of like consolidate all this censorship and grip on rule of law on everything.
No, I mean, I think what is relevant, and it sounds very, I mean, it's disheartening and maybe even tough, but what, anyone from the opposition, from civil society is doing, they will continue. They will continue to stay in touch with European officials from various member states, with Brussels, and so on and so forth, and be informed. I mean, the EU is not engaging with Georgia, but it doesn't mean that they totally forget about Georgia and don't see what's happening on the ground. I mean, the European Union, several member states are still in Tbilisi. They still see what's happening. They are reporting back. It is not mainstream in the news anymore because Georgia has slipped down and it's not that important to too many in Brussels. Let's be honest about that, right? Especially with what's going on in the rest of the world that seems to be on fire. But Georgia is still being seen and Georgians are still being seen. And there are, while we cannot expect any sort of huge, big decisions in their favor other than, of course, financial support, being seen and being heard will always be there, and they will always have people they will speak to. That's true for all places. This is true even for, even more oppressive regimes, that the people in there, the civil society that still exists, are being heard. Now, is that much of a confidence boost? Is that much of a gift? No, but this is a long road, and it's rocky right now, but that's how it is. Like the European Union will not completely abandon Georgia. That's not the way they do with neighbors. But right now relations are not good. But I both in Brussels and most people in Georgia know that it's a European country, and as such, it will be part of the family one way or another, just like many other countries are.
Thank you for your time. And my last two questions. First, I mean, how long can Georgian dream, in your opinion, fake to some extent the picture that these political, geopolitical, whatever tensions are not touching the economy, investment climate, investor interest in Georgia?
I mean, normally what happens is that this sort of things, this sort of impunity can go on for quite some time. I don't think this is the end. It will go on, I think, because the issue is, and I've alluded to that in several of my previous answers, Georgia is not in the center of attention of the Western world anymore. And then there is leeway for any regime to do sort of as they please. So the answer to that question doesn't lie in Washington or Brussels or elsewhere. It lies with the Georgian opposition and people in Tbilisi, how much they are willing to take on this, And they either vote with their feet, which I've said before that many have already left Georgia, or they be on the streets, which they are and probably will continue to be. So the question of how long this is going to last is a question, I don't think for me. It was not even for someone in Brussels. It's a question for the Georgians themselves, how much they're okay with this.
Yes, but we are still talking about the people who already know what they want from Georgia, and the people that are certain that Georgia's future lies with Europe and in the West. What about the people that still support this government? What about the business circles? I mean, that yesterday Mamuka Khazaradze and Badri Japaridze were jailed. These are the two people who have built TBC Bank. I mean, one of the largest and systemic banks in Georgia, and we haven't still heard anyone from the business community talking openly what's going on in Georgia at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. I mean, in a sense, I know that, this is the thing with any repressive regime, that it's feared for as long until it's not feared and someone speaks out. But I'm a bit worried that it will continue for a long time because I mean I can draw parallels with Russia. Because we always thought at what point does the Russian public say no? When it comes to everything happening in Russia, never happened. I can even draw certain parallels with Turkey. It's the same thing. I mean, like, at what point, like you have the mayor of Istanbul being jailed. Did that create any sort of big ruckus? No, it didn't. So the only people who can change this, don't look to the West to save you. Look to the West as a goal, but in the end, the only ones who can truly make changes are brave Georgians themselves. This is the truth. You are in a sense on your own in that fight, because I don't see the European Union going forward being very active in many of these places. They will be supportive, they will issue statements, they will try to maybe have sanctions, but that's it, because even the EU is becoming more inward-looking and occupied with its own problems rather than trying to deal with neighborhood countries. They will be supportive, there will be money, yes, but in terms of big changes in society, it can only come from inside. So the door is open, but the door is far away.
BMG's foreign relations expert Alex Bukapetriashvili interviewed Nicholas Tenzer, a senior fellow with the Democratic Resilience Program at the Center for European Policy Analysis, CEPA. Nicholas is also the chairman of the Center for Studies and Research on Political Decisions, CERAP. Nicholas is currently a guest professor at the Paris School of International Affairs. His current interests and writings are heavily focused on political risk analysis, European issues, Russia and Ukraine, disinformation, warfare, the Middle East, U.S. foreign policy, human rights, and corruption. A senior civil servant, Nicholas is a former advisor to the French Minister of Economy and Finance. Here are some insights from the interview.
We see the attempts of the international community to put Putin to the table of the negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky and make a ceasefire happen. But we see this Putin's attempts to drag out the process, to play with the major players with regard to the negotiations and dragging out this process, and of course continuing, even increasing the bombardments of the peaceful civilians and the population of Ukraine. You've been there many times. You have visited just recently, 5 weeks ago. How it is considered in Ukraine? Is there an expectation that Putin will be put at the negotiations table first? And I want to hear from you, is Putin really willing to end this war and stop killing the people?
First of all, I mean, there is a common assessment among the Western leaders, and by Western leaders, I mean mostly European leaders, plus our Japanese, Canadian, South Korean, France, that there is absolutely no appetite whatsoever for Putin for any kind of peace. I mean, the clear intention of Putin is just to put Ukraine under its grip, to continue to either kill the Ukrainian people or to subdue them or to enslave them. I mean, that's a clear intention of Putin. So I think that when I hear some people and some leaders talking about, peace negotiation, about peace talks, about peace deal with Russia, it is no. I think that's just impossible, and that's just fool's game, in my view, because there is absolutely no willingness for the Russian regime to end the war. When it comes to the ceasefire, it's a little bit different, however, because I think ceasefire, there could be a kind of ceasefire, which doesn't mean peace. Let's be very clear for that.
Absolutely.
But we have to take care that this ceasefire and the conditions of which it is settled doesn't increase, the Russian capabilities. Just take an example. If the ceasefire say, okay, we stop doing anything, let's say in the Black Sea, for instance, then you may have, the Russian ships coming back to the Black Sea, from which they were excluded by the Ukrainians. And I think certainly it will be very dangerous for Ukraine. So let's be very cautious about that. The second question is also about, what the Ukrainians are feeling. And it was, I went to Ukraine 6 times since the beginning of the All-Out War, starting on February 24th, 2022. And I think that the feeling of the Ukrainian is the following, just 2 points. First one, they do not want to surrender. As one former Ukrainian MP said, basically, if we continue fighting against the invaders, we certainly know that we will lose certainly thousands of our young people. But if we stop fighting, we will lose millions. And I think that's basically the common sense in Russia. So there was an opinion poll recently. There is absolutely no question whatsoever to give up the territories, because if we see what happens, in the already occupied territories by Russia, you have, rapes, collective rapes of women. You have deportation of children, which is a crime of genocide, according to the conventions of December 9th, 1948 on the repression and prevention of the crime of genocide. You have torture chambers quite everywhere, or you have forced disappearances and summary execution. So they do not want to give up the territories, and they know also that they have started, the Russians, in the captured territory, already the enrollment of the young Ukrainians in order for them to fight alongside them, in the Russian army, and to die, to be cannon fodder. And I think that's not acceptable. The second thing is that there is more optimism in Ukraine right now. Just see what happened with Spider's Web, and I was just before Spider's Web. Yeah. That's something that I'm saying since 2 years. Because of their own abilities, ingenuity, their technological skills, the Ukrainians are able to invent. And I'm sure that at the end of the day, probably they will have won by themselves.
Yeah, that's the very important point. You mentioned winning the war by themselves, and Spiderweb operation, unique operation, I must say. There were a lot of talks that this operation could change the entire continuation and the process, and the war itself, the type of the war and the war strategies. This is such a big news for the war strategies that Europeans and others would think a lot, would have to rewrite their strategies under these technologies. Do you think that Ukraine has also some other cards in their hands, to not to surrender, not to give up, and to protect and defend their positions in relationship with Russia?
Yes, I think that basically Ukraine has the card, and yes. my statement is a little bit different from Trump's.
Yes.
As you know, because he has the card, he has the technological cards. I know that Ukraine is also developing, long-range missiles, yes. which is fairly new. They were already very skillful in targeting, the ammunition depot and, of course, oil refineries, in the depths of the Russian territory. And look at the statistic. I'm not saying that the conditions of fighting for the Ukrainians are easy. No, on the contrary, that's very, very difficult. That's very harsh. And had reporters coming from the front line, from people, from medics as well. The conditions are absolutely horrible. But they are resisting. Certainly, there are some advances of the Russian troop, and the Russian troop advanced since the beginning of the year of 245 kilometers, but on the territory of more than 500,000 square kilometers, which is basically not enough. There are pressures. We already know, unfortunately, that Ukrainian forces are not able by themselves to immediately reconquer the lost territories, because I cannot lie on that as well, unfortunately, but they are resisting. And at the same time, I mean, if the allies are doing their duties, and by allies I mean the European states, mostly the EU plus UK, Norway, plus let's say the Japanese and some others, I am quite certain that in 1 year and a half or 2 years from now, the Ukrainian will be able to. But I mean, that's basically what the Europeans should do, basically to transform their economies into war economies, to increase their spending to 5% of the GDP. And I mean, that's absolutely mandatory. Not only, I mean, for Ukraine, but also to protect ourselves, you know, in Europe. And I think that in this condition, there could be certainly, you know, a victory. So basically, just to sum it up, I think that we must not have a kind of peace plan, illusory peace plan, but we must have a plan for victory.
The full opening of Georgia's energy exchange has been postponed once again until July the 1st, 2027, according to a new resolution by the government of Georgia, which came into force on June 26. According to the resolution published in the Legislative Herald of the Georgian state electoral system, is now expected to fulfill several technical and regulatory tasks by 2027, including establishing, testing and simulating a balancing market platform with potential participants, creating a registration system for entities responsible for balancing and forming the appropriate registry, developing a unified accounting and settlement database for the wholesale electricity market. In parallel, the commercial operator of the electric power system, ESCO, is tasked with developing, testing and simulating tools for organizing wholesale public services, preparing for full-scale operations of the wholesale market alongside other market operations. From July the 1st, the balancing market operator will take on full responsibilities, including running the balancing and ancillary services market, purchasing balancing energy and reserves, conducting financial settlements, managing the register of balancing service providers, implementing a fully operational unified accounting database in accordance with legal regulations. The ESCO will also begin providing wholesale public services as a designated operator. Sector representatives told BM.G that the postponement reflects a lack of readiness among market participants, particularly concerning hourly balancing obligations, which were cited as a significant technical and financial challenge for many companies. The delay, while not unexpected in industry circles, raises further questions about the pace of Georgia's energy market liberalization, which has already been delayed multiple times. We started with the voice of the business, and let us wrap up the same way. What was new this week in business? Natia Taktakishvili will join us with a short overview.
The iconic Central Telegraph building in the heart of Tbilisi has completed its transformation into a 5-star hotel. Hotel Telegraph officially welcomed its first guests on June 20, offering a blend of historical charm, refined design and modern hospitality standards. Located in the historic center of Tbilisi, the Telegraph promises visitors distinctive experience, combining elegant architecture with innovative services. The reconstruction was led by internationally acclaimed architectural studio Narian Hu, known for its work on landmark restoration projects around the globe. Their design respects the building's architectural heritage while introducing sophisticated interiors and sustainable energy-efficient technologies. The original building retains its historic facade. Inside, however, it's a modern hotel that reflects the evolving standards of contemporary architecture and hospitality. The Hotel Telegraph is a major project by Silk Road Group, representing a total investment of €65 million, with financial backing from TBC and Bank of Georgia. The hotel features 239 guest rooms, 7 diverse restaurants, a jazz club, bar, and fully equipped banquet and conference spaces. A landmark architecture is that the Telegraph has been the first hotel in the region to join the leading hotels of the world, one of the most prestigious Globe Hotel Association. The reopening of the Telegraph is also a key part of Republic Square.
development plan aimed at the revitalizing area and reinforcing Tbilisi's image as a dynamic world-class destination. Lamborghini has officially entered the Georgian market with the opening of its first showroom in Tbilisi. In Aghmashenebeli Olei, the legendary Italian brand is exclusively represented in the country by Toyota Holding. Lamborghini CEO Stefan Winkelmann called the move an important step in the brand's global strategy, aligning with the debut of its full hybrid models and long-term sustainability goals. The grand opening event welcomed over 500 guests, featured interactive installations, music, and a stunning display of Lamborghini models in the colors of Italian flag. Toyota Holding emphasized the significance of this partnership, noting their commitment to premium services and the brand's high standards. The 300 square meter showroom includes a state-of-the-art service area and 80-person configurator, allowing clients to fully customize their vehicles. With this launch, Lamborghini brings a new level of luxury and performance to Georgia's vehicle market. Georgian cosmetics company Pil Naturals is expanding into the decorative cosmetics sector. The founder Tatuka Lomadze shared the news on BMG2's Business Morning, noting that brand is currently developing new products, starting with lip gloss and soon expanding to the foundations and other makeup essentials. Lomadze revealed that she will attend a training in the UK focused on ingredients and formulation for decorative cosmetics, an important step towards ensuring product quality and innovation. Already present in Kuwait market, Pil Naturals is seeing growing interest from Europe, particularly Italy, Spain, and France. The company plans to enter the European market with a franchise in Italy, citing strong demand and significant Georgian community there. Not a day goes by that we don't fulfill B2C exports to Italy, Spain, or France. Italy is especially active, and we are now searching for right locations, said Lomadze. Founded 8 years ago, Pil Naturals started with a single product and has since grown to 10 branches across Georgia, including Tbilisi, Kutaisi, Rustavi, and Batumi. Its 11th showroom recently opened in Kuwait, marketing the brand's first international expansion. Healthy food delivery service Balance is set to move to a new 800 square meter enterprise in Saburtalo starting in September. The company co-founder Nutsa Surguladze shared the news on TV program Women's Narrative. Operating for the past 2 years and a half, Balance is known for offering fresh, high-quality meals at affordable prices. According to Surguladze, the new facility, acquired with 5 support, is currently under renovation and will elevate the company's production standards. Our meals are made with fresh vegetables and never frozen meat. We even have a French chef. This new space will help us take quality even further, she noted. The company currently employs about 12 people in its kitchen, but plans to grow the team to 60 as it expands into both healthy meals and a new confectionery line. A dessert and cake offering is also in development. Regarding B2B opportunities, Surguladze said that while the brand prioritizes quality, which can make competing on price difficult, but they still don't exclude future business partnership in that sector. The founder of Hotel Paliani in Swaneti, Ekaterina Guelesiani, says the hotel is facing a significant drop in revenues in 2025 due to geopolitical instability and changing tourist profile. Speaking to BMG TV, she attributed the decline in regional conflict, specifically the Ukraine, Russia, and Israel-Iran wars, which have triggered cancellations from long-haul markets such as Australia. These countries view the region as a whole and tend to avoid travel during the conflicts. Galassiani noted, adding that the hotel is not optimistic about the summer season following a difficult winter. She also pointed to the growing influx of low-spending tourists, particularly from India and China segments actively targeted by Georgia's National Tourist Administration. As a result, Hotel Paliani has had to reduce prices to remain competitive against the budget family-run accommodations. According to Tourist Administration, visits from China rose by 70%, while from India by 28% in Q1 2025, among the highest increase after Israel. Georgian restaurant Russiko, located in Warsaw, Poland, has been officially recommended by the Michelin Guide, an achievement that marks a significant milestone for both Georgian restaurant and the Georgian culinary heritage. The news was shared by the owner and restaurateur David Turkestanishvili during an interview with BMG TV. The Michelin recommendation is a prestigious recommendation from one of the world's most influential culinary authorities, validating the restaurant's quality and consistency. It also signals the growing international appropriation for Georgia's cuisine. I have always said that Georgian cuisine is very traditional and classic, Turkestanishvili said. Michelin stars have very narrow and specific criteria, so always believed it would be difficult for a restaurant like ours, which says true to traditional recipes, to receive such recognition. Despite the challenge, Russiko was selected among the top 108 restaurants in Poland, placing it in the Michelin Red Guide alongside the country's culinary elite. According to the Turkestanishvili, the recognition is not just an honor for the restaurant, but a celebration of Georgian culinary identity. Opened in 2015, Russiko was named in honor of Turkestanishvili's mother. Since its inception, the restaurant has faithfully adhered to authentic Georgian culinary traditions, offering not only traditional dishes such as khachapuri, khinkali, and tsodi, but also a culinary immersive experience. Georgian wine, hospitality, and ambience all play a central role in the restaurant's concept. Turkestanishvili's vision was clear from the beginning: to introduce a genuine Georgian experience to the European market without compromises. With this latest recognition, Russiko joins a growing list of Georgian establishments that are gaining attention on the global gastronomic stage, reinforcing the idea that Georgian cuisine has a proud place in the world cuisine. Georgian blueberry producer Agrolane is expanding its global reach by diversifying export markets beyond its primary base in the Gulf countries. As managing partner Georgi Ghuniashvili shared with BMG TV, the company has already launched cooperation with India and is currently in negotiation with Poland and Germany. Operating in a 40-hectare farm, Agrolane produces an average of 300 tons of blueberry annually, with around 70% export. While this year's yield may decrease due to the bad weather conditions, Ghuniashvili says the company's growth plans remain unchanged. We believe in this business and see great potential in it. Our total investment, including the enterprise, is about $5 million, he stated. Agrolane had intended to export to Israel this year, but geopolitical tension between Israel and Iran have halted that plan. However, the company remains optimistic about the entering the Polish and German market, provided the harvest meets quality standards. We are working with both countries and they are ready to receive our product. Weather delays have impacted the season, but we remain confident, Ghuniashvili noted. Official statistics show growth in Georgia's blueberry exports in the first 4 months of 2024. The country exported 18 tons of blueberries.
And that's all for today. We will meet already next Sunday, but before that, of course, stay tuned on BMG.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.